phone if we go off, so it would be.
Yes, we can. Hey guys, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Mark Catelli. I'm with the Couple of Fern chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society here in Central Florida. Welcome. Happy Earth Day, everyone. We're here with Ginny Stibolt. We're having technical difficulties right now, as many of us are self-isolating. We're using the internet more and more, so the internet bandwidth has come into play at this point. But I want to welcome Ginny, noted author, ardent supporter of the Florida Native Plant Society, author of 5 books with 6 more to come. I love plugging Ginny. She's a wonderful person. Ginny is in Jacksonville and is a member of the Ixia chapter up there of the Florida Native Plant Society. Please comment away. We can view your comments live, I believe. We'll be happy to post them. However, please keep in mind, due to technical problems, we may fade in and out, or you may experience technical difficulties on your end due to the same issue. But happy Earth Day, everyone. I'm so excited to have Ginny here with us. Ginny, if you'd like to say hello to everyone and begin your presentation.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me, and do celebrate Earth Day, everybody, because we only have one planet, and it's important for us to be active in supporting environmental groups like the Florida Native Plant Society and the Audubon Society and the national parks and stuff. So I personally am going to be donating today to a number of my favorite environmental groups because it's important. It's important. And 3 years ago, I was in Washington, D.C. in the March for Science, and that was awe-inspiring. It was just amazing. All the scientists in Washington, D.C. marching together. I met a lot of interesting people. And 50 years ago, at the first Earth Day, I also marched in Baltimore, Maryland with my small child at the time, who's now over 50.
Oh, Ginny, I think for us as an environmental organization, every day is Earth Day.
Absolutely.
But it gives us reason to celebrate many different organizations attacking many different aspects of our environment, to come together, to band together, to celebrate, to see and feel the unity across so many organizations that are here to hope and work towards a better planet.
Yes.
Yes. So let's dig right in and go into your presentation. I'll start with the first slide.
Okay. So this is my conglomeration of red, white, and blue native plants. So I post this often on the 4th of July. So let's be patriotic. We'll plant real all-American plants instead of those aliens from other countries. But today we're going to be celebrating Earth Day here just a little bit. And one of the things that people say that you can do that's the most beneficial to the planet is to plant a tree. And so this morning, and we can go to the next slide, this morning on Vox, VOX.com, there was if you go to, here we go, that they had a little article there saying 7 things we've learned about Earth since the last Earth Day. And number 7, and they have a lot of interesting things there, and you can go to Vox to see the rest. But number 7 is trees are superheroes, and the world is starting to recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
At the United Nations Green Climate Fund raised $10 billion for the Trillion Tree Initiative. So we can take part in that by planting more trees in our yards and in our neighborhoods and taking out more lawn and that kind of thing. But today we're going to talk about trees. So let's get started on that. All right, and we need native trees. And the trees that are native are the ones that attract are insects. And the insects are necessary because they feed the birds. Now, the plants and the insects have had a long relationship together, and the trees know how to regroup after a bunch of caterpillars have eaten their leaves. And the insects, like the monarchs, have particular plants that they need to for their own larval food source. So they need particular food for their caterpillars, and that's milkweed. And so we can plant milkweed. So there's a lot of things that we can do as native plant enthusiasts to go ahead and better support our wildlife, because the natives and the native wildlife worked together before man ever came around. And one of the biggest things we can do is plant a tree. So go to the next slide. Oh yeah, and we want to go native. And where do we find native trees? Well, there may be some at our local big box stores or garden centers, but probably not very many different types. And we want good diversity in our yards. So I highly recommend joining the Native Plant Society, and you can find plants that are a list of plants that are native to your county. Last time we talked about Florida natives, and Florida's a big state. And so something that may be native to one county is not necessarily going to be native to your county. So, you may have a gumbo limbo tree that's a wonderful native for South Florida, but where I am up near Jacksonville, it's not going to grow, even though it's a Florida native. So you can get a list of plants that are native to your county on the FNPS site.
That is the beauty of Florida.
Yeah.
When you think about native plants, they are native to our region. It's almost like a language accent. Each region has its own accent, its own plant community that makes it special.
Well, it does. And the Native Plant Society, of course, has 37 different chapters. And the chapters are regional, and they have the local knowledge, and they have the information for people on what works in their particular areas. Now, I've been a speaker at many of our Native Plant Society chapters, including yours, Mark. And it's always interesting to see the differences between the chapters. It's a remarkable organization made up of a wild array of different types of organizations within our organization, because Florida is a big state and regionally we are different.
Yes, I agree. I always tell our fellow chapters we're specialists to our own region.
Absolutely.
We specialize to our community. Many of our chapters are rural and focus largely on restoration, field trips. The more urban organizations work toward urban community gardening, pollinator beds, schools. We diversify based on our community's reach and needs. So we identify those needs based on our local community, and then we find those opportunities to address them.
Right. And the other partner with a Native Plant Society is the Florida Association of Native Nurseries, the FAN organization. And you can go to their website, plantrealflorida.org, to find a native nursery near you, or to find a particular plant. So you can look up, if you want sunshine mimosa, you can look that up on their website. Or if you go to their main website, you can find the nurseries near you. So native is real important. So we want to choose a native tree. Okay, yeah. Next slide.
All right.
Okay. We want a native tree, but but not this particular one. This is
Magnolia.
a magnolia. This is the Magnolia grandiflora, the southern magnolia, and it is a native, and it's native to much of Florida, every part but except the most southern part. But here it is in a big box store, and there are several things to notice about this. One, it's been topped. So you can see right there where it's been cut off, and then other branches have come up near there, so that they're trying to be the new leader. And the growers do this so that the plants look bushier. And we've been trained all our lives to want bushy plants. And so the growers cut them off. But
Right.
you reduce the life of the tree
Indeed. And
by cutting off the top.
right, some of our trees do have an apical growth, meaning they do have a leader that is the apex of the plant. And when you damage that apex, it does hinder the future um, growth as well as its life. The lifetime of the tree is also adversely impacted.
Right. So we need to watch out for that. The other problem with this tree is it was like 7 feet tall, and it was in a container. And so it's been held in the container for years to get this big. It probably had a 3-inch thick trunk. So this tree is going to be expensive to buy, and it is actually going to take a long time to adjust to your yard.
Right.
So it's much better to buy a smaller tree that's only like 1-inch caliper. And while it's smaller, it's going to adjust to your yard much more quickly. So you don't have to keep watering it, and it will start growing much more quickly than this old tree, and it'd be much less expensive. And within a couple of years, it would outgrow this tree. So
Agreed.
yes, we want natives, but we have to be careful. And
Agreed.
the other thing is that this magnolia tree is probably a cultivar of a magnolia and not the wild form. And that's why the Native Plant Society, and the native nurseries are important, because they're the ones who are going to have the real Florida wild magnolia that is going to service the wildlife better. Now, it's not terrible to have a cultivar of a magnolia, but it is better to have the wild one.
Right. Ginny, in your experience, when we talk about FAN, Florida Association of Native Nurseries, and they're carrying magnolias, a question that usually comes up in just casual conversation is, are they carrying trees that they have raised that are found locally to their area? So they're actually raising magnolias that they find in their region, propagating them and selling them?
Yes. I mean, there are the wholesalers that service these nurseries that grow the plants, and they're local. Yeah, they are real Florida. And that's why the website is Plant Real Florida, because these are the plants that belong here. Okay, so we want to choose a smaller tree than this. But if we're buying a container tree, and we talked about this a little last time, we need to go to the next slide. We need to rinse away all the growing medium in the pot. Okay, we rinse it away, and then I usually put the medium that I rinse off, I usually put it in my compost pile. So it works. But we don't want to planting. We want to have okay.
Ginny, I would repeat everything that you said about a minute ago since you broke up.
We've also growing media from soil. This growing from the roots. We want big root that they're rooted because we not have all that rich fertilized material in the animal.
Folks, we are experiencing technical difficulties on Ginny's side. Her screen has frozen up, so please bear with us. It just takes a few moments for the bandwidth to stabilize again and for us to continue the conversation. So Ginny was basically talking about, washing your root ball, making sure that it's not root bound so much. When it's root bound this much, it tends to also stress the roots because they keep winding themselves over and over again. And I think Ginny's back with us. Ginny, if you'd like to continue, that'd be great.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we want to unwind the roots, and quite often you'll find in the pot that the roots are going around and around and around. You want to spread them out in the planting hole so that they point outward and not around each other. We want those roots to grow out, and we want them to grow out. Now, when you rinse the roots, though, that means that you're going to need to irrigate a lot. So you need to mud it in when you plant it, and you need to irrigate it every day. So there is a little extra work for you when you do this, so that you would because you're ripping off all the root hairs, you want to give it enough water. And you do not want to trim the tree when you plant it. Even if it needs trimming eventually to shape it, unless the branch is broken, you leave everything there for at least a year, maybe 2 years. Because where do plants get their energy? They get them from the leaves. And if you chop off the branches to make it look better, then you're cutting off some of the energy that the plant needs.
So, Ginny, essentially what you're saying is to space apart the stress events of the tree. It's stressful for the tree to be repotted or put into the ground, especially when it's root bound. And you want to space apart the next stressful event so that the tree has a chance to establish as well as heal itself. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. It's the poor tree, and yes, it will wilt more because there's more to support. So, I mean, quite often we've been told that you want to chop out a third of the tree so it won't wilt as much. But that is actually counterproductive as far as the tree is concerned. So yes, you're going to have to water a little more, actually a lot more. All right, so we go to the next one. And so here's the answer to why you want to bare root the trees. Now, this is in California. These are copper beeches that were planted probably 20 years ago. And they look like they were doing fine, but whoever
Folks, Ginny has having technical difficulties again, but don't worry, she'll be back in a minute. But what we're looking at right here is a tree that has circled its roots over and over again into a root ball. And then just with any sort of a high wind or severe weather event, even a mature tree that looks mature from the ground up has basically no structure or support underground. This is particularly true when you're buying root-bound trees of a greater age, 3 years or more, and then they tend to not be planted appropriately. And when that happens, it tends to not establish itself into the ground, continues looking like it's growing and growing okay, but the story is quite different underground. Matter of fact, when the roots are stressed like that, you learn through any sort of arborist course that you take through college or through certification, through organizations such as the University of Florida, IFAS, that any sort of stress event that happens on a trunk or a branch that is large or on the root system is a potential vector or opportunity for pests. So this plant probably had an overlying or underlying pest disease or a fungal disease of some sort that eventually won with a severe wind or weather event or both. Um, Remember, this is what I really enjoyed about Ginny's slides so far is that you really want a young tree. A 3-inch caliper is a little bit, I don't know if it's going to work or not. You really want to start with a young tree. With magnolias, especially, you want to make sure that they are close to where their roots can access the water table readily. So that's why in nature you find many magnolias and the plant community associated with magnolias in mesic environments. Mesic means that the soil is well balanced with moisture throughout the year. They also happen to be a wetland type plant. They're closely associated with rivers, lake shores, shorelines. Any area that magnolias are found in natural environments typically look verdant, typically look like they're part of a wetland or a mesic type habitat. So right plant, right place goes far. You really want to make sure that you're planting, a magnolia in a yard that has access to the water table underground readily. My yard, for example, is sandhill. It was built. The house was built over an old orange grove, so and you're back.
I'm back.
Guys,
I'm
thank you
so
so
sorry. I'm so sorry.
No worries. Happy Earth Day. Easy
Yes.
peasy. No worries.
Okay.
Hakuna
So,
Matata.
this is where we were. The copper beeches that were planted like 20 years ago, and they didn't take off the netting around the roots, and it was not. It was probably because it was planted in a narrow area between a sidewalk and a street. So they said, oh, well, we'll keep it on so that the roots don't break the sidewalk and the street. But then 20 years, this is what happens. It's basically choked itself. So don't do that. All right, but then there's a question. Okay, so if we're planting native trees in our own lousy soil, what do we do about fertilizing those trees? This is actually a sable palmetto, and this picture is from, probably 12 or 13 years ago. And the sable palmetto is now very large, so it's doing quite well. But what you would do is you would put your own locally made compost in a ring outside the planting hole, so that way you urge the roots out. And in Florida, we want our roots to go out so that we have our trees to be more drought tolerant and more wind tolerant. And so if you do this more than once, then each time you do it, you would do your ring of compost around the tree a little wider, so that each time you make the soil a little richer. You do not dig it in. You could put mulch on top of it if you want. Of course, the mulch never touches the trunk of the tree. But you could put mulch on top of it, but you never dig it in. You just put a ring in it, and the soil microbes in the compost and in the soil will merge. And so all the nutrients in the compost will be dragged into the soil.
Right. Matter of fact, we had a speaker, a soil specialist, not too long ago, and he mentioned that compost is nature's slow release fertilizer.
It is.
Using
Yes.
compost is it's effective. It's using refuse, food scrap stuff from your kitchen, and it's repurposed into your yard, but it is nature's slow release fertilizer. Many people advocate slow release fertilizer, but guess what? So is compost.
Yes, that's right. Compost is slow release fertilizer with microbes, and we want those microbes. Okay. All right. Now, the other thing we talked about is that trees and lawns are not good companions. So we'd want to get the edges of our lawns, what we have left. And of course, I have a freedom lawn, and we talked about that last time. It's free from herbicides and fungicides and fertilizers and over irrigation. And it's never been reseeded since we've been here since 2004. But what you'd want to do in creating a easy mowable area, and this is in my front yard, and I created a little meadow out there, the end of the tongue of lawn. Just for your information, all of that area out to the street, there was just a ring around that was all lawn. So it's about, it's more than 1/10 of an acre that is now a forest instead of a lawn. But I do have an edge that's a meadow that ended up. So my husband, who mows the lawn, just goes around once with the mower without having to use any other tools, so that it makes it much easier to mow. And if you go to the next slide, the reason we want to pull the edge of the lawn away from the trees is that the trees suck up a lot of water. A typical mature oak tree on a summer day will transpire about 400 gallons of water. So the trees move the water from the soil into the atmosphere. And about 90% of what they suck up through the roots evaporates right out through the leaves. So the trees are amazing weather modifiers, because that moisture in the air then gets carried up into the jet stream, and that becomes our weather. And when you chop down the rainforest or other large stands, then less water is going into the atmosphere, and we're getting more drought. And when we have more drought, then there's more forest fires. And when there's more forest fires, then more carbon is released, and we have more heat. And more carbon is released during the fires. And so that it's important that we protect our trees and plant more trees. They're extremely important. And while the carbon sequestration is quite important, the real service of the trees, especially in a forest, is their transpiration, where they're moving the water from the soil to the atmosphere. But in our yards, if we pull the lawn away from the edges of the forested areas, and this, again, this is my yard, then I put leaves or chipped wood or something in the area next to the lawn, and then have to redo it every once in a while. But an edge like this, where the ferns have filled in, where the lawn was pulled out, because the lawn went right straight to the edge of the forest. When I pulled out the lawn, then these ferns came in. I didn't plant these ferns. I have royal ferns and cinnamon ferns and net vein chain ferns and some other ferns I've got that have come in, but they make a wonderful edge because the lawnmower just goes under the frond. So this is a wonderful, sustainable, low maintenance edge. And every couple of years I go through, pull out more lawn, the ferns move in a little farther. My husband has one less pass through this area. So,
question: how? So it seems like you have shrunk your lawn edge by edge over time.
absolutely, yeah.
How many years are we talking here?
Well, we've been removing lawn since 2004. We moved in. So it's been, as I said, we have an 1.5 acre yard, but
This
we've
is a very,
probably gotten rid of half of the lawn.
I have to say, this is a very time effective. This is time management at its finest, where you have slowly but surely let nature, come back. It's not just a lawn. Even in your lawn from your previous presentation, there were so many natives intermixed in there. How
That's
smart.
right.
How smart. I must commend you on your time management.
Yeah, it's just, and of course, I wrote The Art of Maintaining a Florida Native Landscape a few years back. And one of the problems that we have as native plant enthusiasts is that we overpromise how great the native plants are going to be. But they are plants, and some of them are going to die, and some of them are going to become too aggressive, and so they're not maintenance free. Yes, they're better than the aliens, but they're still plants.
Right. And some are more maintenance free than others. They're not all
Absolutely.
created equal.
No, they're not.
Right. Right. And that's the art of maintaining a landscape. I believe that's the name of your book too.
That's exactly right. And because there's not just one way. And what works in my yard in Northeast Florida is not going to work particularly well. I mean, you're certainly not going to get this batch of ferns if you lived in Fort Myers. You're just not. So you have to regionalize it for your particular situation. I was fortunate enough in this property to have trees around the edges so that the ferns are already there, and that makes it easier than somebody who has a lot in the middle of a bunch of other lots with nothing around the edges, because then you really do have to start from ground zero, which is why you need to plant some trees. Okay. All right, and this is at UNF, University of North Florida, which was to be our location for the Native Plant Society conference this May, but it will be the same location next May now. But I liked this edge that they had, where they had some red bud tree and some holly bushes and stuff along an edge, and behind it was completely unmanaged property. I mean, they didn't do anything in there. It was what would be considered to be a messy, weedy spot. But I like that they put this edge in here so that it looks like it's managed. And the edging is important. And because we are trained to want the manicured gardens and landscapes, this helps people understand that what you're doing with your native plants and your native prairie and your native grasslands or butterfly gardens is done on purpose if you put in a neat edge. So that's why I included this.
I think this picture is worth 1,000 words, and you're absolutely right. It really draws your eye into the manicured portion of the ecotone, or the edge between lawn and conservation area or an easement or whatever it is. But it does formalize it. It does give it intention and purpose. And I do see those plantings in the picture where there is purposeful planting, but beyond it is just wild growth. So I love it. This is a great visual inspiration, folks, our viewers. You know, you need to invest in an edge. It's simple, cost effective, and it also tricks the eye into, or not trick. I think what Ginny's trying to say is it gives the eye intention that what you're doing is intended.
That's correct. It becomes less weedy in the way it looks. And do come to the conference next May, because UNF, University of North Florida in Jacksonville, has almost all native plants in their landscaping. So they have done a very good job, and there are native plant areas that are set aside on the campus, and there are hiking trails on the campus in Jacksonville. Okay, so here is our main topic. All right, so here we have a photo I took in the Villages several years ago, and it's now famous. This magnolia tree is now famous. It's been in one of my books. It's been in my presentations. So here are some maintenance problems. So we've got two different properties, one next to each other. The property behind the magnolia property is easier to maintain. Here's what you're looking for. They have pavers around the plantings. So when the mowers come through, they just come through and ride on them on the pavers, and they don't need to come back with a string trimmer for trimming. So that is an easier to maintain, although I don't like all that mulch, the bare mulch. The purpose of a non-lawn landscape is not to have all mulch. You want it filled with plants. I have a whole article on my blog that says mulch is not the purpose of a non-lawn landscape. All right, but on the close-in property here, we've got the magnolia tree. It's a beautiful magnolia tree, but they've got two shrubs that are too close to it and are pruned, and they've got a gravel piled up around the trunk, and they've got a metal vertical edging to hold the gravel in place. So this means that whoever mows this is going to have to come back with a string trimmer, and the gravel could very easily come out and get shot into somebody's window or hurt somebody on the street. So that is not a good maintenance situation. Plus, I love our magnolia trees. They're just beautiful trees, but they shed their darn leathery leaves all year round. Wow. So they're a mess.
They are. And they take their time to biodegrade. And, you know.
Right. They're large and leathery, and, you know, the mowers may or may not actually mulch them enough to do any good. So you normally have to rake these leaves up before you mow. What a pain in the butt that is. So here's our solution in the next one here. This is a drawing that Marjorie Shropshire did for the art of maintaining a Florida native yard landscape. And what we did here is create a grove around the magnolia tree. And how large should the grove be? It should be as large as that drop area. Where you're dropping under the tree, and you make that grove so, area in this.
Hold on 1 second, Ginny. You're breaking up, so you may want to repeat the discussion on this slide from the beginning.
Mute me. There we go. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So to make a grove, you would plot how big the leaf drop area is around the tree. So you look at where all those leathery leaves fall, and you draw a line around there, and your grove around the tree should be at least that big. If it's a small yard, you probably can't make it too much bigger than that. But if it's a large yard, then you could make it quite a bit larger and take out the lawn around the tree. And you don't have to do it all at once. All right, now, magnolia is an acid-loving tree. And so those leaves are going to produce an acid mulch. So you'd want to choose plants that like the acidity being a little bit more acid than not. So what we chose here were some sparkleberries, which is a type of blueberry. We've got a bush blueberry, we've got muley grass, we've got walnut viburnum, and some kuntis. But you could end up doing whatever collection you like. You know, you don't want to have too many different things growing in the middle of the yard, because then it would look chaotic. So you'd probably want to limit your plant palette to only a few woody plants, so that you don't have one of everything. You know, this is not an arboretum.
All right, Ginny, just wait. You're getting technical difficulties on your end as well. It seems when everybody's isolating, everybody is on the internet as well. So, Ginny, just give it a few minutes. You will regain your connection. So, guys, in case you're just joining us, Ginny is our noted author and featured speaker for Earth Day 2020. She is discussing under tree canopy gardening. So with magnolias, their leaves, when they shed, they can be quite hard and difficult to remove. And they do not biodegrade readily over time as well. So what do you do when you have a magnolia already established on your property? It has a robust root system. It's resistant to a lot of different wildflowers or other types of plants that may be wanting to grow underneath the canopy but are fighting for the same resources. Ginny will tell you this as well. But when you plant a tree, things that grow underneath the canopy are really competing for resources, not just sunlight, but also nutrients. And chances are with an established tree, the tree will win. So you really want to make sure that you're planting trees with storage capabilities like Kunti does. Kunti has a very starchy root. You also want to make sure that you have rhizomatous plants so that they colonize and they can share resources such as ferns. And then you also want to make sure that you are pairing plants that have the same soil pH profile needs. So for example, in this diagram, she's paired magnolia with sparkleberry and Walter's viburnum. Both are acid-loving plants. Blueberries are also acid-loving plants. That's another example of vaccinium species. Sparkleberry happens to be part of the vaccinium genus as well. Muhly grass, love grass. Keep in mind with love grass also, they tend to exhibit being short-lived perennials, meaning that after a while they may phase out of your lawn. So do collect those seeds. Many of our wildflowers favorites, in fact, gaillardias, for example, are short-lived perennials, or they may be just annuals. So you really want to make sure that they reseed into your lawn or your garden. The same thing applies with red salvia. Many people don't realize that salvia is an annual. So mulching is not necessarily your best friend. It may keep the weeds out, but it may also present a barrier for the next generation of red salvias for the next season. So with frequent seeders, you also want to make sure that you have the right balance of mulching versus ensuring the next generation of wildflowers. Mimosa is another excellent example, and Ginny is just joining us back. Hey, Ginny, welcome back. I was
Oh
just
man.
covering the diagram, so
Yeah.
no worries, we got you.
Okay. So if you have a larger space in your yard, you could actually plant trees, so that you have not just a single tree, but several trees together. And so you might even plant another couple of magnolias, or you might plant sweet bay magnolia instead next to it. So you'd want to, and again, you don't have to do this all at once. You could do it a little at a time. Okay, but what if you have, and let's go to the next slide. What if you have a crepe myrtle from India? They're so overplanted. Your tactics for this may be different. Now, a crepe myrtle is not invasive. If you don't trim the heck out of it, it can be a pretty good tree. This is in our backyard. We cleaned it up again back in 2004 and 2005 and took off some of the extra branches that had come up because they had over trimmed it. And now it's a 25-foot tall, wonderful tree. And so the birds use it as when they come to dive bomb the bugs in the lawn and stuff like that. But if you wanted to plant a grove around a crepe myrtle, you may do so with the intention of replacing the crepe myrtle with native trees. So you leave the crepe myrtle there in place, but you plant native trees around it as space allows. And then you would start trimming back the crepe myrtle as the native trees grow, so that your intention over the long run would be to eventually get rid of it when the native trees that you plant around it have grown into its place.
So
But
is this a smart way of utilizing crepe myrtle is a very delicate looking tree. It gives dapple sunlight underneath its canopy,
yeah,
which is wonderful for people that don't want to irrigate their lawns quite a bit. That dapple sunlight does reduce the need for irrigation, for frequent watering. This is a solid game plan, Ginny. I really appreciate you putting this slide together, especially with crepe myrtle. It's a really large specimen, but you can utilize it to your advantage and grow some plants underneath its dappled sunlight slash semi-shade requirements, so that those plants actually get an advantage and grow successfully over time.
yeah. Now it's not being eaten by much. And so it doesn't service the birds as well as a native tree would, but it does transpire. So it's putting water into the air, it's cooling the air, because transpiration, when the water goes from liquid in the tree to water vapor in the air, it actually cools the air. So when you're in a forest, you know how cool it feels. That's because it is cooler. It's not just the shade. It's that the transpiration has actually reduced the temperature. So if you have a tree like this, now if you have an invasive tree, then you would remove it. But if you have a tree like this that's not native but is in good shape, then you could work around it with the thought of replacing it. So let's celebrate Earth Day today by planting some trees and appreciating the trees that we do have. The city of Baltimore put a dollar value on their urban trees. And because a large tree is worth a lot more than a small replacement. So that we need to think in those lines that we can do more for the earth, and do think about donating to your um, favorite environmental organizations
Right.
today.
Of your choice. Yep. Water conservation, forestry, many different organizations that specialize in different aspects of environmentalism could benefit from your donation. So, Jenny's absolutely right. Easiest way to help with carbon sequestration, sorry, tongue tied here, um, as well as with weather, climate. Uh, Trees transpire. Plant a tree, preferably a native tree. The native tree that you can find is readily available through the Florida Association of Native Nurseries, FANN. For more information, always research the type of tree you want to consider, because a tree is a long-term commitment usually. You can always find information on that through fnps.org, FloridaNativePlantSociety.org. Ginny, along with the web design team, have put together wonderful content under a tab called Natives for your area. So just type in the plant, you find it. Matter of fact, you can even search based on your county. So you can click on your county and it will give you all the plants that are naturally vouchered or naturally found in your area. As a native plant enthusiast, I always recommend, and Jenny can second this on as well, but trees are the very first conversation. When it comes to restoration, you're always inclined to look into the entire matrix. That's why the mission of Florida Native Plant Society is not just native plants, but also native plant communities. So we are invested in reestablishing and restoring as much as we can, to the best of our abilities, the native plant matrix.
And on the FNPS website, there is also other educational material so that you can learn about what the Florida Native communities are. There's a whole presentation, so to speak, on the website of all the Florida communities. So you've got mangroves, you've got scrub, you've got all kinds of information there so that you can better educate yourself. I don't know if you want to go to that at this point, but it is a wonderful educational resource so that people can learn. So if you go to native plants, and so native plant communities. And here you can, it's a whole long thing about what our various communities, our plant communities are. So this is an educational thing that you can be more informed about our state, whether it's an adopted state, like for me as a transplanted gardener, or whether it's your home state. There's probably some real interesting stuff that you can learn here. So it goes through what is a xeric, very dry uplands, and then, what is this one and what is that one. Shirley Denton put this together. And so she's a wonderful ecologist who is also an excellent photographer. And so this is going to be the definitive information on the various things, and you might be able to figure out what belongs in your neighborhood by
That's right.
looking at this. So it
That's
gives you
right.
a little bit of background.
That's right. And it also ties into gardening as well, because with gardeners, we always touch base on a concept called companion planting. What works with one plant, what works with how they work together, if they work together, if they don't. You can glean inspiration from native plant communities, because chances are, if one plant is growing, you can readily find the next native that is growing in its vicinity. And it's a great inspirational tool to use native plants as they are naturally found in our neck of the woods.
Right.
Well, guys, it's
Okay, well, next week we're going to get together again on Wednesday. And
yes,
next time we're going to talk about palms.
yes,
So I think you'll learn some interesting
the
stuff.
glorious sable palm, right, Jenny?
Yes, that's our state tree, but guess what? It's not really a tree.
That's right. So Palms 101 with Ginny. Tune
Yeah,
in next Wednesday at 2 p.m. and we will be on Facebook Live for that. And I'm sure, please come with your comments. It's much easier through Facebook to view your comments and post them. Ginny is super interactive in that sense, so she will welcome your feedback, questions, comments,
sure.
concerns. So
Yeah.
we'll see you next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Ginny, thank you so much for joining me and prevailing through all our technical difficulties today.
Well, I'm sorry about that, but so it goes. Yeah.
That's right. It's life. Kumbaya. Happy
Yeah.
Earth Day.
Same to you, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.